for open source cybersecurity contributor onboarding. This includes me, Jen, and Kate. And what we're going to cover is introductions and icebreakers so we can get to know each other a little bit better, more about the project pitch and priority issues for our open source projects, how you can begin to start to contribute, answering any questions that you might have, and then how you can keep in touch with us and the work that we're doing. So I'll start with intro. So my name is Vic. I use they, them pronouns. I'm the community manager for Arachne Digital. I've been involved with open source since like 2015. I started with an organization called Open Austin in Texas. And kind of through that is how I met Cade and how I'm here now. Outside of open source, I'm really into like poetry and art, and I do like tarot readings and stuff. And just more generally, like community really interests me, like digital community, in-person community, and like how we can like build bridges between those spaces. Yeah, Cade, would you like to go next?
Hi everyone, I'm Cade. My pronouns are he, him, and they, them. I've been working in both open source and cybersecurity for a little bit now. So I started doing some volunteer work with Mozilla, and that's how I met both Jen and Vic. Worked in a couple of different spaces doing cybersecurity, ended up starting Arachne Digital, specifically looking at cyber threat intelligence. I guess outside of work, I'm an avid reader. I'm not getting a huge amount of time at the moment with all the Arachne work. But you can't see it, but I've got like bookcases sort of like around me. So I very, very much like science fiction and fantasy when I get a chance. And my current obsession is I play Magic the Gathering, and there's a crossover with Final Fantasy, which is a game series. So I'm really enjoying that.
Hey everyone, nice to meet you virtually, Tanushka and Jane. I'm Jen or Janine. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm on the tech side of things at Arachne Digital. I always say this in the intros, so I met Cade at Mozilla, but I didn't meet Vic until working on Arachne, even though we were all Mozillians in some way. My background is computer science, and I'll be your point of call if you want some help with tech stuff or navigating GitHub. In my spare time, I'm soaking up the summer sun here, and I volunteer at a cat shelter. And I'm also a Final Fantasy fan, so I'm stealing Kate's obsession. Yes. Oh, you're on mute.
Thanks. So yeah, we're Arachne Digital. So we are a cybersecurity startup that has an open source tool, Thread, which you'll learn more about. And we focus on cyber threat intelligence in particular. And you'll hear a little bit more about both of these things through the presentation. And if you'd like, you can explore more on our website, arachne.digital. And I'll go ahead and drop a link too. I'm gonna check it out. So right now we're sitting between the space of like open source software and cybersecurity. So I heard both of y'all say that you're interested in cybersecurity or maybe becoming interested. I'm kind of curious if y'all have done any work in open source before, but that's kind of what we're here for. We're big advocates for open source. That's how we all kind of connected and met in the first place. And you're joining us now for an event, but we host these kind of regularly. So just last week we had open source cybersecurity co-creating our futures, where we had a panel with Kay, Jen, somebody from the New Zealand public sector, and then somebody who worked at Microsoft or who works at Microsoft in the US, speak more about cybersecurity and open source sustainability. And that's going to be up on YouTube shortly. And this month is actually Maintainer Month. So Maintainer Month is something celebrated with GitHub. This is an opportunity for people who are open source maintainers to gather, share, and be celebrated. So people are sharing their stories about being an open source maintainer. There's also like a challenge as well as like a library of resources. And Arachne Digital, we participated in the partner pack. The partner pack, which gives people who are open source supporters or maintainers kind of like an opportunity to get resources from throughout the community. There are other events going on this month too, so if y'all want to check out the schedule or learn a little bit more about Maintainer Month, GitHub, or just other aspects of open source, it's a good resource to go to, and I'm going to drop that in the chat. If there is anything you learned today or you want to stay connected with us, we are on LinkedIn at Arachne Digital, and we're also on Blue Sky. Those are a good place just to keep in touch with like the other events we have, but also news and resources about cybersecurity. So now we're kind of curious to learn a little bit more about y'all. I think we heard where you're at in the world, but if you want to share maybe the current time and an emoji that you're vibing with in the chat, that's helpful too. Because Cade, Jen, and I are distributed as well. So I'm currently in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and it is 4:12 p.m. And I like the sun emoji because it's on the Argentina flag and it's nice.
Hello.
Yeah.
It's currently 10:13 p.m. in Kenya, Nairobi.
Yeah.
As for the emoji, I think it's just a normal emoji. I don't know. I'm just gonna say normal. I'm not gonna use. I don't know which emoji to use for that. So
That's fair.
Here in South Africa, it's 9:15 p.m. at night, and our flag kind of looks like a catapult. Like there's a fork, or I'll just drop a picture.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Awesome.
Okay.
And Jane, are you saying it's 10 at night or 10 in the morning? Just so I'm clear.
10 at night.
Oh, okay.
We are just slightly ahead of South Africa, I think.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And then for Cade, it's 7:12 in the morning.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm part of a trio of this evening group because it's 8:14 for me in London. Sorry, Cade, you were saying it's an early start for you.
Yeah.
Oh.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, y'all, and making the time. I'm excited to learn more about y'all. And this is an opportunity to do that. So if you feel comfortable coming off camera, that's great. If not, you can just chat. But we're interested in, we told you a little bit about ourselves, and we're going to share more about the projects that we're working on. But we're interested in learning more about you and what your interest in this event was. I kind of heard early on in the conversation that, maybe newer to cybersecurity, but if y'all have any background in open source or maybe what skills y'all are looking to use or grow.
Okay, for me, okay, I'm gonna turn the camera not right now, maybe later on. I'm still new in cybersecurity in the sense that I'm kind of learning the introduction part. In a bootcamp, it's like I'm switching from another career to cybersecurity because my previous career is a bit oversaturated. I studied law, so I was wondering whether I can combine it. As for whether I've ever been involved in open source, it's like a new venture for me, so I'm kind of not familiar. I just know of GitHub. I was advised on putting my projects on GitHub and all that, collaborating with other people, but I'm not familiar with that. Hence the reason why I asked the question whether we can have a session where you can help us how to navigate with GitHub for people who are not knowledgeable in that. And that's all for now.
Thanks for sharing, Jane.
For me, same as Jane, I also am in the introduction phase. I have my ISC2 certificate in cybersecurity, but like that's it, and that's quite entry level. And I'm used to open source software like p5.js and processing.org, and Strudel is also open source. So I am used to open source, and I think it's amazing. Like I love open source. So yeah, great work, guys.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. So it sounds like, Jane, you don't have a GitHub quite yet, maybe, and Tanushka, maybe you do have a GitHub, or I'm just kind of curious. So
Recently, yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And Jane, are you needing help navigating GitHub? Have you been able to make an account yet?
I haven't. I think maybe I'm postponing, considering I don't have any projects to post because I'm still new at this. So I wanted to first of all start creating certain projects and then just posting them with that. I don't know. It's just a bit confusing, a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, no, totally fair. I'm just trying to get a good gauge on where y'all are at and maybe what resources and stuff y'all might need. But thanks so much for sharing. All right, so at this point, we're gonna move into a little bit more about our projects and everything. If at any point, you have a question, you can, I think we have a small enough group, so you're welcome to use the raise your hand function, and then we can stop and slow down and maybe explain something. Or you can drop a message into the chat, and we can make sure to like maybe go over that concept in depth. I know both of y'all are newer to cybersecurity, and with all of these like technical spaces, there's like usually lots of acronyms or organizations or backgrounds. And I myself am newer, and I've learned a whole lot over just like speaking with Cade and like being in these spaces. So don't feel shy to ask any questions or if you'll need anything. All right, I'm gonna hand it over to Jen now, though, to share a little bit more about our project.
Let's kick off with some more GitHub. So with our open source, we have our repositories on GitHub. Jane, I can hear you as you're like, oh, GitHub. And I understand what you're saying about not sure about diving into it if you want to like set your own project up first. So I did a quick search engine search, and they have their own kind of tutorial to get you started if we don't supply like another tutorial or another call in the meantime. So that tutorial will just be setting up something very small, something simple, and GitHub will be your interface for using something called Git, and Git is version control. So if I have a document that lists out all the things I love about law and all the things I love about cybersecurity, and then I decide in another version, I'm going to add 10 more bullet points to why I love cybersecurity more than law, then that's like another version of my document. And if I used GitHub, that would just be a nice way of viewing that version control of a document. So that's just a quick thing I wanted to say on GitHub as a whole. Tanushka, you're probably going to be more fluent in this, but I hope that helps. So we have a few open source repositories here, but we're going to talk about two in more detail in this call. And our first one is Thread. You can navigate to our GitHub repo by like searching us up, or if you go on our website, there's a link to it in our footer. But yeah, so I'll start off by talking about Thread. Thank you, Vic. So Thread is an open source repository that we forked from MITRE ATT&CK's prototype called Tram. If we're all, like, when I was building upon Tram to what is now Thread, I was also very much new to cybersecurity. So MITRE ATT&CK is a framework, like a dictionary of all the different cyber threats that, sorry, I got distracted by a sneeze. Bless you! That you can, look up. I'm not explaining this right. I'm going to let Kate explain it when he talks.
I can take a moment.
Yeah. But it was very useful for me when I was like just learning more about cyber threats. Thread itself, it's a tool where you can submit a URL, and then we will web scrape the contents and present that back to you, and with machine learning, mapping some of those contents to the cyber threats that we believe that are being discussed in the sentences there. So for example, like phishing is a cyber threat, and that has its own entry in the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So you might have a sentence highlighted saying, I think this sentence is discussing phishing. But the machine learning model might be wrong. It might be talking about donkeys. And then you might want to just reject that to help us out. So both Thread and Tracery are built in Python. And talking specifics, Thread is using something called AIOHTTP. And if you delve into the code base, like, you'll learn more about the structure there. So yeah, we have a live version. So we've got the link there on our arachne.digital URL there. That's a version that you can use that's hosted by us, but you're also welcome to go to GitHub and download your own copy of the code base and use it locally. It just means that the machine learning models won't have some of the training that Cade, our analyst, has been working and building on. So you might actually get mappings where it's saying there is an attack for a sentence about donkeys. Yeah, I think that's Thread in a nutshell.
Cool. I can talk to this slide. So I guess to cover some of the concepts that we've just looked at. So we have this application called Thread. It takes in a URL, it scrapes that URL, it gets the free text, and then it maps it to this framework called MITRE ATT&CK. What MITRE ATT&CK is, it's just basically a big list of hacking techniques. As Jen said, it covers phishing, covers a whole raft of things, and it's constantly being added to. Now, this framework is quite useful for a few different reasons. It gives us a common language that we can all speak about. Computers are quite complex. Hacking in and of itself is like, some of it can be quite simple and some of it can be very complex and sort of get down to sort of like the individual bits and pieces as far as how software communicates, how an operating system operates, and all of this stuff. So to simplify a lot of that, if we can talk about hacking techniques with a specific set of terms, that just basically helps researchers from all over the world be able to speak about the same things, even if they might have different data points, they might have different understandings of various things. But if we all are using a common language, it just lets us be able to communicate a lot easier. One of the other good things about it is just knowing that there is a hacking technique that's sort of spoken about in the free text, that is all well and good. What Attack will also do is it will tell you the techniques that are applicable to a certain tech stack. So it will break out the techniques that are applicable to Windows, that are applicable to Linux, Mac, and some other bits and pieces. What it will also do is it will list out the different mitigations and detections. So once you know how you can be hacked, or the different techniques that can be used that are relevant to the technology that you are trying to defend, you can then look at, okay, so I now want to do something about that. And Attack will tell you, this is how you could mitigate this, as far as if I want to stop this completely, these are the things that I would need to put in place to stop that particular technique. It will also list out detections. So if you can't stop the technique, because there's some you just cannot stop, they will rely on things like social engineering, which is interaction with a human being. You can't really stop a lot of that. So I at least want to be able to detect that it's a code, so I still can do something about it. Attack will break down those detections as well. And there'll be particular tools you'll probably use with that. So you might be using something called like EDR or a SIEM. So SIEM is Security Information Event Management Tool. It basically takes in logs and it aggregates those. And then you can run analytics over that. That's sort of getting a little bit more sort of like into the sort of advanced areas. But it is a language that gives us this ability to map these techniques to ways that we can do something about them. And so MITRE, as an organization, they came up with this tool called TRAM, and it is the prototype to what we have now. As far as you would take in a URL, it gets the free text, it uses machine learning, and then it gives you these techniques. MITRE is an amazing organization that puts out some absolutely amazing work. Their resources are pretty stretched thin, so they put out TRAM, and it didn't get some updates for quite some time. So Jean and I had this idea that we would basically take this code base and start to build upon it. And so that has ended up becoming what we have now as Thread. MITRE has now sort of taken TRAM in a different direction. So we have kept our fork of the code base, and we are continuing to build out what we've now developed into Thread as our application. Cool. I'm happy to move to the next slide. Awesome. Cool. So I've spoken a little bit about some of this. So I guess to build on some of those ideas as far as like why Attack is important, and some of the things it can do. So we've now got this like idea that we have these hacking techniques, and we now have these ideas as far as like we can do something about them. That starts to build into this concept called threat-informed defense. So threat-informed defense is basically like a methodology, it's like a mindset that MITRE is popularizing. And what it says is, if you have cyber threat intelligence, which is just knowledge of the different things that are occurring out in the wild, as far as hacking that could impact your organization. So just having an understanding of what your threat landscape is looking like. If you understand that, you can then use that to inform the different defenses you want to put in place. So rather than just sort of pick a couple of different tools and just put them in and just hope for the best, or rather than have like a really slick salesperson come along and be like, hey, this is the tool that you need, like this is the silver bullet that's going to solve all your problems. If you're actually using some evidence to figure out, okay, this is actually what I need to defend against. And then you can figure out, okay, well, what does the evidence tell me I need, rather than me just having to guess or having to listen to a sales or something like that. So that's what threat-informed defense is. The next piece of that is basically testing those defenses. So there'll be what we call a red team. So that is basically a team that pretends to be hackers. They will come in and basically test those defenses to see if there's any gaps in them. You will then basically go to fix those. You get more threat intelligence. And so basically it's a cycle as far as like more threat intelligence comes in, you build more defenses, you test those defenses, you fix them, you then get more threat intelligence, and you sort of just keep going around. Another use case, so if you sort of step further along in your cybersecurity career, and you end up in what's called a security operations center. So this is normally a security team that an organization will have internally. So we call them a SOC. And so you'll be responding to threats, and often you'll have a lot of reports that come out as far as like all the different threats you've responded to. And those reports are just free text, and they contain lots of useful information. But because they are free text, it can be quite difficult to sort of like read through all of them, because there can be sort of many from over time, and figure out like, how do I actually like get use out of this? Like, it's a whole bunch of free text. Like, how do I categorize it? Like, what use can I make of this? And so one of the applications for Thread is basically a sort of, you can put your reports through it and it will give you the TTPs, which are tactics, techniques, and procedures, just those hacking techniques. And then you can basically work through that threat-informed defense piece as far as like, oh, these reports, now that I've got a structured way of understanding them, they tell me I need to care about these things because I've seen these things in the past. I'm going to use these defenses to defend against them. And also like threat intelligence reports. So again, like if you're in a SOC and you're starting to get threat intelligence reports, as far as like, you might have a vendor that is sending you information. You might have a partner. If you're working in government, you might have partners overseas that send you information that say, hey, we've seen this stuff and we think you should care about it as well. Again, this, rather than it be a report that's free text and you go, this is a lovely report, but how do I get some information out of it? Like, and I've got all these reports coming in, what do I do with them all? You can use Thread to basically structure that information and then make it actionable for you. Oh, happy for the next slide.
And we do have a question in the chat
yes.
From Jane as well. Is
I
MITRE
don't
TRAN
know.
similar to what Ryan Montgomery does? Sorry, I'm just repeating it for the recording later.
I don't know who Ryan Montgomery is. Let me have a quick Google.
I had to Google him as well.
Okay. So
he looks like he's done like a few things in the cybersecurity space. Jane, was there something in particular of what he's done that you're thinking regarding your question?
He has a website that checks vulnerabilities. If my understanding is right, that Thread Maps checks the vulnerabilities and also gives you like information on the defenses that you need to take. Am I accurate on that?
So with the former, are you talking about when you give a website, it's checking the vulnerabilities of that website? Right. So when we talk about submitting a website to Thread, we mean like more on the reporting side. So a website will be talking about threats, and we're presenting back to you the intelligence or the words of that website and mapping it to what the threats are about. We do not do like a security scan on if you give Thread a website telling you, oh, here are the potholes, fix them. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess just to build on that, so it looks like this gentleman has done some penetration testing work, and then, as you're saying, Jane, having a web scanner. So basically, the idea is that you would basically put a URL into, like, I haven't seen this tool, but I'm assuming you would basically put a URL into it, and it will tell you these are the vulnerabilities that you want to be fixing. As Jen was saying, we will basically be looking more as far as like reporting. So if you've got blog posts that are talking about these are the different hacking techniques that people are using, here's an incident report as far as a response that this organization has performed recently. We ingest that free text and we map it to MITRE ATT&CK. So we'll tell you this is what is being spoken about online as far as different hacking techniques. So we're gathering intelligence that way. It sounds like this particular tool is very specific to a website. And then separate to that, it looks like he's done some penetration testing work. So penetration testing is basically that red teaming piece I was talking about, where you will come in and you'll pretend to be a hacker, and then you will try to hack, be it a website or an application or anything like that. And that's a piece of threat-informed defense. It's complementary to what we do, but it's not specifically what we do per se.
Yeah, a way that I kind of like to look at what we do, or cyber threat intelligence with the reporting, is like almost like preventative care and healthcare. So you know all these things that are going wrong because there's articles about it, like COVID, for example. You know, it's like, oh, we know we get sick because we're not masking and it's airborne. So it like gathers all the articles that tell you like how you could have a vulnerability or get sick, and then it tells you, because these things are happening, these are the things that you should do to protect yourself. That's kind of a way I see it.
Yeah, just to, I guess, to build on that analogy. So the idea is like, it sounds like this person's website is like, if you are sick, you would go to a doctor and the doctor will tell you these things are wrong with you. What we do is we gather all the research around that field and we tell you, hey, here's the way you can not get sick in the first place. Both things are useful because you can't always do the preventative stuff all the time. They are two different things, but both are useful things. So yeah.
Awesome, good question. Thanks for asking.
I'll try to be brief because I've done a little bit. I've already like waffled a little bit, so I will try to get through some of the stuff very, very quickly. So there's been some interesting developments in cybersecurity in the last little while. So MITRE, as I said before, is this organization that does some work in different areas, and one of the things they put out is ATT&CK, this framework. One of the other things they do is they work on the CVE program. So CVE, so that stands for Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures. So it is basically the program for basically giving a numbering system to vulnerabilities, which will be very much in line with what that gentleman's website is looking at. And MITRE do a lot of this work in conjunction with another US organization called CISA. So that's a US government body. Given what's sort of happening in the US at the moment, so CISA is having its budget cut. They're having a number of staff that have left that organization. That has put the connection with MITRE as far as how these two bodies are working together in a little bit of question. There was some initial concern that this whole CVE program was actually going to be unfunded and would not be able to continue. And just to underscore what that would actually mean is, so the CVE program is used all over the world. Every country uses it for being able to understand what vulnerabilities are out there and then being able to patch them. So the US, because things have sort of just organically grown, it just so happens that the US runs this program. And if the US stops funding it, it means the world no longer has this. There are other programs that have started to be stood up. So the European Union has started to stand one up. But it just goes to underscore that we've taken for granted quite some time that there are these programs that serve the world. And when their funding gets cut, unfortunately, bad things can happen in that sense. Now, it is still running at the moment, but it is still a question as far as for how long. So, and just very, very quickly, so ATT&CK, this lovely framework that we use, it has a new version that came out in the last, I think about last month, and just some of the very, very quick highlights as far as some of the new changes. So they've now got some techniques that map directly to what we call ESXi. So ESXi is basically a hypervisor. So if you think of your computer runs on hardware. Now, you might want to run multiple computers on the same hardware. And so you use what we call virtualization. So you run a virtual machine, which is just basically which is like a snapshot of your system that can run on your computer, and you can have multiple of them running at any given time. It's a way of basically getting more use out of your hardware, by able to run more things on it. And all that virtualization, all these virtual machines, they run on what's called a hypervisor, which is just basically the application that controls all of that. Now, if you can get access to the hypervisor, you can get access to all the virtual machines, which is why hypervisors are sort of very sought after as far as being, if you can get into them as a hacker. So ESXi is one of the main hypervisors out there. And MITRE has now brought out some techniques so that we can basically collect information on how they're being hacked and how we can defend them, which is a sort of a big step because virtualization is something that's used in sort of most sort of like mid-sized to large organizations around the world. So it's good that we're sort of keeping abreast of these new, the way the technology is changing, basically. Some other changes, so MITRE introduced some what they call data components. So MITRE gives advice around mitigations and detections, and both of those sort of have different elements to them. The detections have these things called data components, which is basically just giving you further in-depth information about them. So MITRE has made a bunch of improvements. And then for the mitigations, they've given a bunch of additional real-world guidance and just sort of like tidied up a lot of the mitigations as well. So it's just a general improvement to the framework that we wanted to highlight, because it's nice that these things are continuing to be maintained, particularly in a world where funding and stuff is becoming more and more precarious. Did you want me to talk to this slide, or?
I can do this one. So this is just a quick slide to say that we have on YouTube a walkthrough of my lovely voice guiding you on how to download Thread locally, set up, and submit a URL. So some slides before, we said we wanted to focus on 2 open source repos for this call, and the second one is Tracery. Tracery was forked from a popular meta search engine called Search. Meta search engine meaning a search engine that goes out to other search engines. So for example, if I typed keyboard, it would then go to, depending on what I've configured, Google, DuckDuckGo, gone blank on other search engines, Bing, Yahoo, not really thinking of great ones, but yeah. And regarding tech, it's also a Python code base. Specifics, it's a Flask app. And unlike Thread, we don't host a live version of Tracery, but we are maintaining our own fork of it, especially since Sex is no longer maintained. So some recent updates. Yep, just picking up from what I said about Tracery. Tracery has been like the odd updates here and there. Cade has labeled an issue as a priority. He'll be just going through briefly some priorities after this. Thread is the one that we had some major changes on. We refactored one of the larger files, so hopefully it's a more welcoming file if you ever delve into the code base. Yeah, those have been some updates. I think you'll notice Thread might sometimes get more updates than Tracery, just because Thread is the one that we're hosting live and that's interacting with more, and by that nature we'll have more updates and features that we want to add. Whereas Tracery, it is just, for us right now, it is just is the meta search engine working okay? Are the security updates okay? But yeah, I think Cade will have some priorities to list for both repos.
Awesome. Okay. So basically, we have a number of tickets against each repository, and so the idea is these tickets are sort of discrete things that we are basically asking for help for. They are things that we would be keen for people to come along and have a look at with us. So for Thread, we have a number of tickets that are looking at the Disarm implementation. So Disarm is another framework. So we have Attack as one framework, Disarm is one of these other frameworks, and what it looks at is disinformation. So disinformation is discretely different from hacking, but they are very, very similar as far as sometimes the way you go about them is kind of the same. And they are also often used by the same types of groups trying to achieve relatively similar ends. So we are looking at also analyzing disinformation. And so we are looking to implement this new framework. So we've got a couple of different tickets around that. And we're also after some stuff around sort of like overhauling our UX UI. Now, I know that they got mentioned as far as something we wanted to dig into. So we have this as a ticket because we have some different skill sets in our group. We don't really have a lot of deep understanding as far as UX UI. Like, we're able to get by, but we're very keen for someone that sort of has that experience to basically like give us some advice, to have a look at our applications and figure out like, could they be designed in a nicer way as far as people being able to interface with them and use them. So we're very, very keen on that work. So that's looking at Thread. For Tracery, so because it is a relatively new project for us, and we are kind of using it just sort of, as Janine was saying, it's just sort of ticking away in the background. It's doing what it does, but we haven't dug into it too far. We're keen to get a bit of understanding as far as if there's any memory unsafe code. We don't think there is in the actual application itself, just because the vast majority of it is written in Python, but there could be some instances where different libraries are being called or used and that kind of stuff. And so we're keen as we get a bit of understanding as far as like, is there anything that is memory unsafe? And there's sort of like very particular like languages that will be unsafe. And what memory unsafety is, it's basically you are using memory from the computer. If you don't free it, or if you start using it in ways that you're not supposed to, it can cause various different issues. So we just want to get a bit of understanding as far as like this new project that we've decided to take on, like, is there any issues there? And then the big issue, so we had like issue 26 on that prior slide as one of the priorities for Tracery. So that one is looking at building some maintenance processes for supporting different search engines. So at the moment, Tracery has the ability to support quite a lot of search engines, but because there's lots of search engines, and those search engines are managed by all these different companies, they have different configurations, things change constantly. And so we're looking for a process that will let us know, hey, has something changed, and therefore we need to update some configurations on our side. Rather than us having to manually check all that, we're keen to get something that will basically give us a bit of an alert to say, hey, this search engine is broken, you need to fix this. So just wanting to get a bit proactive in that sense.
I know we covered a lot, so are there any questions or anything that you would maybe like us to go more in depth about? I'll pause for a minute, no pressure, but you can drop something in the chat or come off mic. If not, I'm going to go ahead and move into the next session or next section. And then if anything else comes up, feel free to continue to raise your hand or drop something in the chat. So this is a little bit more about contributing. So if you're interested in the projects that we shared, or you want to learn more about cyber threat intelligence in particular, MITRE, how we're using it, just the code base, the number one thing would be to get familiar with our code of conduct and contribution guidelines. So Nishka, I know you said you're already in GitHub, so maybe you're familiar with navigating these. Jane, happy to like share with you like where these are at and what you can read. It's just basically saying like, you know, where we're coming from and how we would like to work together. And then the second thing would be to find an issue in our GitHub repository that might pique your interest. So I dropped a link to our, specifically to Thread, but there's the Thread, there's Tracery, there's also a community repository that's more like planning for these sorts of events. So you can browse around in there, see if there's something that might pique your interest, leave a comment or ask a question in Slack about it, and we're happy to answer. And then the third thing would be like to communicate. So, you know, if you find something you're interested in the project, then it's like say hello, what I just said, basically like say hello in Slack. We have different channels that allow you to ask questions, or if you want to just be in there to like learn more about the updates that we're giving or sharing the articles that we're sharing, it's a good space. If you have questions, you can DM us directly or in specific channels we have for contribution. If y'all are, I don't know if y'all are in our Slack channel, but I did send a form out prior to the call, but this is the form right here. And then, yeah, that's kind of the gist. Are there any questions? Anything else we could cover? We only have a few more minutes, but if not, I'll have some like closing announcements. And you're welcome to keep the conversation going in Slack. And the jot form for feedback, you have the ability to be anonymous, or you can leave your email if there's something you do want us to follow up on. I know Jane, you mentioned like maybe getting help with GitHub, so I can share some resources with you specifically. And then since y'all are both newer to the cybersecurity space, there's another Slack that I'm familiar with that you might be interested in. They do different calls and presentations as well.
One thing I wanted to add, so we were talking about the priorities for the tickets. I also wanted to highlight, if there's no tickets that are jumping out to you, but you do see something as far as like, hey, this project does need something, I want to like add something. Or you're like, hey, I have a particular skill set, and I think that while there's no ticket for it, this skill set is still going to be useful to you. That is stuff that we are still very much interested in. So if there's something that you would like to contribute that isn't a specific ticket, please let us know. Like, we'll make a ticket for you. Like, we will list out sort of like all the different things that we can sort of think of as far as that will be helpful in how to actually achieve that, and give you as much scaffolding as we can, as many touch points as we can, to help you sort of work through that. We'd be really keen for that kind of stuff. At the end of the day, those tickets are a view of the world of like us three that are on this call, and there'll be new people with new perspectives that will want to come along and do stuff. So we're very keen to make sure that those perspectives are catered for and those new skill sets are catered for. So
Awesome. Thanks, Gabe. So how can you stay in touch? Joining us on Slack is a really good way to stay in touch. On the Eventbrite forum, there's also the ability to check if you wanted to sign up for our email list. And let's see, we're also, like I mentioned, on social media. So LinkedIn, all three of us are on there, as well as Arachne Digital. And we're on Blue Sky as well. So these are good places for you to see what we're involved in and what events we're hosting or what opportunities might come up. And last but definitely not least, your feedback is super important to us in making sure that we're providing good value or good information about what we're doing. So if you have a moment, I would really appreciate filling out the jot form. Because yeah, this will just help us in the future to maybe be more specific on certain topics or provide presentations on different topics as well. And that's all we have for right now. We appreciate y'all stopping by. There's still like 5 minutes left, so if you want to like look through any of these links shared, happy to stay on for a bit. If there's any more questions that come up. All good. Awesome. Well, thanks, y'all, Jane and Tanushka. I hope to see y'all on Slack if you're interested, and there'll be a follow-up email too with these resources.
Thank you.
thank you everyone for your time.
Thank you for your time.
Go ahead and close the call now.